right, I want to thank everyone for attending. I know that a few of you are probably familiar with Novell Filer. You've heard a lot about it. So we're going to go ahead and kind of discuss it a little bit here, go over what it is, what it's meant to do, and then from there we'll do some demonstration of its capabilities. So if we want to just take a look back at file sharing in the past, you know, people needed to either be in their office, maybe they could access it using a VPN, typically a slow connection. You'd have to have your IT folks that would actually maintain everything. They'd create up your shares and things like that. And oftentimes, just because file sharing was so difficult, people would wind up using email as a file server by emailing documents back and forth and having a number of different emails with different versions and difficulty trying to keep track. Then a couple of things happen. First, you know, you've got the iPad being released and, of course, some other tablets as well on the Android side. And then you had something called Dropbox, and now the next thing you know, people want to access their information on those great tablet devices, and Dropbox makes it really easy. So now people, you know, users, they're happy, they can get access to their information, but as an administrator, you've got some challenges here. First of all, you've lost complete control of the files. They're stored out in the cloud. You don't know anything about security. You can't do any kind of controls even with your firewalls as far as who can come in and get access because it's no longer located inside your network. So you've got some potentially sensitive information that could be out there exposed to the public internet and really no way of controlling it or verifying that you're meeting various compliance regulations. So now, if you look at then the cloud thing in a little more detail as well, what happens if you have an outage? You know, I know yesterday Google actually had some outages with their services. When you have an outage, no access to any of your information. You have to look at internet bandwidth issues since now all this information is leaving your environment to go to the cloud and coming back down. And again, I want to stress that regulatory compliance. It's on a couple of slides because for certain verticals, especially finance, that can be a very important thing to consider. On top of that, you've got the challenge of BYOD. Besides the devices that you, as the organization, are handing out to employees, you've got employees that are also just bringing in their own devices, and especially in academic institutions where you can't control what the students are bringing, you have to look at, well, how can we go ahead and support all of these devices that people are just bringing in? Let's have some sort of management capability without invading in their space since it's their own equipment, and let's try to get some, you know, enhanced productivity. Now, one thing that some customers are looking at are mobile device management solutions like Zenworks Mobile Management, and it's a great way to secure devices and lock them down and things like that, but that still doesn't answer file sharing. You've got to have a solution for that. So you see now where there's, you know, strong demand for people to access their corporate information or files that are stored on OES servers, Windows servers, regardless of wherever they are. They want to be able to share these documents easily with one another and get that sort of Dropbox ease of experience. Yet, you know, as an organization, you want to maintain control of those files. You want to be able to manage who can share what, and you want to make sure that you don't have sensitive information that's being exposed out there. So again, you've got a few different examples of what people may want to do. You know, you've got a road user who's out there, has some urgent changes that he needs to make, and all he's got is his iPad on him. You may have someone who's the team lead working on a specific project. She wants to go in and create a folder out there for everyone that's working on this project without having to go in and bug IT to do this. Or even someone wants to just send a quick link to a document. You know, this could be a marketing person that says, hey, I've got some information that everybody needs access to. So let's talk about how Novell Filer solves all these problems, gives access to your locally stored information to people, you know, outside the organization, inside the organization, things like that. Got several components here, and we'll discuss them all kind of in you know, detail here. First of all, you've got the Filer appliance itself. Filer is a soft appliance built on VMware initially. You've got a couple different deployment options. It could be completely self-contained, or you could actually break it up into multiple appliances that handle different roles, like the database and handling searching and indexing. Ease of management with web-based management from the administrator standpoint, as well as there is some web access for users. And then we don't actually create users in here, so that's important to note, is that we just take the existing directory that you have, whether that be eDirectory or Active Directory, provision users, provision groups access to Filer just based on their identity in the directory. And then they're going to get access to their home folders. They're going to get access to network folders, share folders, things like that, with policy controlling all of that. Back end, you've got your different file servers that are out there. So we're looking at OES 2, OES 11, of course. We'll also support Windows Server. And we're going to honor file system rights and quotas. That's another important thing, so that this doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the wild, wild west and everybody has access to any information they want and completely bypassing any kind of access controls you may have already developed in your file system. And the other thing that's important to note is that nothing has to happen to these servers. We don't need to touch them. We don't install any agents. We don't have to extend the schema of your directories. The environment otherwise remains untouched, and everything is just handled by the Filer appliance or appliances. And then finally, clients. Support a variety of clients, multiple flavors of Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, and then, again, as I alluded to just a little bit earlier, we have web access with Filer. You'll get to see a little bit of this in action here momentarily, but again, you've got access to your own personal information, whether it be your own files in your home directory or additional storage space that the administrator can define and be used as your own personal space. So really, your personal space is no longer just your home directory as it was in the past. You can also easily see information that's shared with you. As you start sharing stuff out, you may also want to say, boy, I can't remember what all I have shared out there and who I've shared it with, so you can easily get that. And then lastly, you've got your net folders, which are used to see those shared folders, so like your different drive mappings that you may have today in your environment. Time frame of this, we're just beginning our limited technical preview right now, so it's been given to a select group of customers, and those folks will get to actually start to bang away at the code. The product is otherwise code complete, but we're obviously looking for any kind of issues or things like that that may come up. And then around the February time frame, so basically around the time of BrainShare is when we're looking at hosting a public beta of Filer. And so with that beta, then everyone will be able to go ahead and get access to this, start testing it. And then finally, right now, we're targeting the initial release for April. So with that version 1 release, current OES customers that are also current on their maintenance will get licenses of Filer, basically equal to however many OES licenses they have. It'll also be available as a standalone product. So if you're a Microsoft environment and you want to get this ease of access to files on your Windows servers, you can definitely purchase Filer at that time. And once we get closer, pricing, of course, will be announced, and then there will be different options, one-year licensing, multi-year licensing, things like that, all the standard things you see. So I kind of went through the presentation quickly because I wanted to dive more into demo. Amy, I don't know if any questions have been coming in. Should we take a moment for any questions, or should I go right to the demo and reserve the questions for either the designated Q&A time later on?
We could really do it either way. So far, I've only seen one question.
Okay. And what's come through so far?
The question I'm seeing right now, is there any beta or trial currently available?
So right now, it's just closed access basically. But what I would say is for anyone who hasn't already been selected as part of the technical preview, and at this point, if you were part of the tech preview, someone would have reached out to you. So if you're not a part of that, I would say contact your local Novell sales account team, because they can look and see if it might be possible to go ahead and get you added into the technical preview program, prior to the actual public beta. That'll be a couple of months from now. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and let's do some demonstrations. So I'm going to start off here by showing the web client. And one thing that I want to stress as we do all this, and you'll see Android, iOS, and briefly we'll pull up Mac. But throughout this, I want to stress that it's a common interface throughout all this. Because again, if you think about Dropbox, it's very easy to use, and you don't have to worry about using a browser, using an Android device, iOS, whatever. You don't have to relearn the solution. So it's the same thing here, is that you're not going to have to go in and just relearn everything all over. So that being said, again, here is that initial screen like what we saw in the presentation a few minutes ago, where you get to see my files shared with me, shared by me, and so on. So if I look into my files here, there's different folders that I've got created. Now in this test environment, actually I don't have a home directory. If I did have a home directory available, then that would actually be presented here. It actually would say home directory. You get some, basic information at the files themselves. Obviously, you can see a file listing, if there's comments and things. So I'm going to dive into another folder here where I've got a few more files out here. And again, you can see now I've got a few files here that have comments. So if I want to, I can go ahead and click on a file just to open it. So for those of you that maybe are familiar with net storage, which was kind of cumbersome when downloading and uploading, very easy to download a file. And so we can see here a resignation letter from Mr. Homer Simpson. Again, people can comment on it, so that can be very useful. Some people might think, well, why do I need that sort of social networking aspect? But if you think about it, if you're working on a project, it may be very easy just to go in and make a quick comment saying, I've made the changes you're looking for, or please look at the changes I made on page 3, something like that. So it's very easy to kind of collaborate on your files by using the commenting system that's out there. And you'll see how we can access that information all across. If I want to go ahead and share that document, it's as easy as checking the box next to the file. I can also share an entire folder, and I could share it with either users, individual users, or with groups. When I go and give them the access, I choose what sort of permission. So view only, or as an editor, they can actually go in and make changes to the files. The other real handy feature here is I can actually make this share expire if I want. So again, if this is, let's say, a project, and maybe I've got a contractor that's using this, and it's just supposed to go for, let's say, 60 days, I could actually say expire this share after 60 days. But what will happen is the share itself will still be out there. It'll be listed, it'll be highlighted in red to let me know it's expired. And as far as that other person goes, the person who had received the information, if they went to shared with me, they would no longer see that file that's out there. So it makes it very easy to go and share with internal users and external. If I wanted to, I could literally start typing in, an email address, like I've got a Gmail address or whatever. I can just type it in, add that to the list here. It'll go ahead and send a notification out. And then the last thing is when you share it, you can also choose if you want there to be a comment. So instead of the person just receiving an email notification saying you've got a shared document, they'll actually have maybe a personal note that you might want to go ahead and include with that. From here, let's see, if I go in and want to add some files, I can also do that very easily. So right here, if I hit add files, I'll get this nice little HTML5 window, and then I can just simply drag a file up there, or I could drag multiple files if I had several. And you can see I can easily get that information in there. So again, for those of you that have used net storage, you can see this is much easier to get that information out there. And of course, you've got other management options, like we can go in and delete it or whatever. But let's look at some more detailed information. So if I want to go back to this Homer Simpson letter that we pulled up, see if I click this arrow next to it, I've got a few more options. One thing is if I don't even, let's say, have the particular application installed, and yes, I have Word, but let's say for a moment that I didn't have anything installed to handle that particular file type, we leverage the same Oracle viewers that are out there in Vibe and in GroupWise, so I can quickly get an HTML representation of that file without having that application. Or again, if I want to go in and view some additional details on the document, I can say view details. Now I get access to really several pieces of information all at once. I can see a preview of it. I can go ahead and manage the comments right from here. I can choose to make some specific edits on the document if I want to, because we do support WebDAV with this, and actually I may get an error there, and I apologize for that. I have the Vibe plugin, and we're working on fixing that particular issue. But I could otherwise do edit this file, and by using WebDAV, again, go ahead and edit that document in place. And that's how we can actually open up access to people on the outside world. If you share with somebody externally, assuming the administrator allows this, I could go ahead and collaborate on it, never expose my internal file servers out there. All the communications is going through Filr and giving that HTTP access to the document. I can also view an activity report. They'll export out as a CSV so I can see which users have accessed the information and what they've done with that. So there's just a lot of great things I could do when I go and view details. The other thing is I've closed that. So if you look back at this drop-down box, there's one other thing, view who has access. So I could quickly just from this screen take a look at everybody that I've given access to if I don't want to go in and manage anything and just want to take a look at that. The folder itself, like I mentioned there too, I can share the entire folder if I want. And here you can see a few of those shares that expired. So some of these folks, like Kevin Crutchfield, if he were to go and share it with me, he would not see this any longer. So speaking of shared with me, then I can see anything that people have shared either with me directly or maybe because I'm part of a group, whatever. And again, there's all that same information that's out there, just like what I saw with my own files. I can view the comments, view the files, things like that. So this is where the sharing aspect really comes in nice, and you'll see with Windows and Mac and some of the other clients how we can have this right on the desktop without having to necessarily use a web interface. Shared by me, I've got a number of files that I have shared, so again, all in one spot, I can take a look at what I've done. I don't have any net folders in this environment defined, but if I had any shared folders, those would show up in here. And the last thing in the web client that I want to point out is, actually there's next to the last thing, there's one more after this, but I want to show what's new. So if this is a very active environment and I'm having some difficulty trying to keep track of what all's been going out there, I can actually take a look at these different areas that my file shared with me or whatnot, but to see what are the recent things that have been done. So for instance, it's shared with me, I could see some of the latest things that were done, looks like some comments that were added to it, or even if I knew I was making some changes, some documents, go in there, see what's new, so I can see that document that I uploaded a few minutes ago is actually one of the most recent things to be there, and then there are some additional files that have had some recent comments and things like that added. And so now, truly the last thing is search. Integrated search, very useful. We actually index the contents of these files. So for instance, we had that Homer Simpson resignation letter. It's just called HJS resignation, so Simpson is never actually part of the file name, and yet if I do a search on Simpson, you can see the document's going to come up here because, again, we get the contents indexed, and the contents of that file does contain Simpson, and so I can then click on it and immediately go right to it. So very powerful, very easy to use searching. You can search the entire site, or you can narrow the searches down if you like. All right, so with that said, let me get my iPad woken up here. Now let's talk about mobile. And I think that's hidden back behind here. There it is. So let's look at my iPad that has the Novell Filer App installed on it. So you can see it's sort of a similar look and feel to what we were just looking at with the web client, with access to my files shared with me and things like that. The other neat little thing here is that we do keep like a recently open list of documents for those different areas. So if I'm commonly accessing a certain document, I can go in here and immediately go to it without trying to remember, oh, what folder was that document in. So if I go under my files, again, you'll see a representation of all the information that was out there earlier. And let me go ahead and go into Files. And if I click on this here, which is the Chicago Cubs schedule, which I'm not sure why I followed that as bad as they played last year, but you can see I get a quick preview of this on my iPad. So again, I don't have to necessarily have that application installed, just like what I pointed out earlier with the HTML rendering ability in the web client. We can do the same thing here. We'll use the native viewers that are in the particular mobile OS. If I were to choose a file that I didn't have that format readily available, I could actually generate that HTML preview of it. The other thing I wanted to point out here is if we take a look, and I don't know how well you guys can see it, but there's a little icon overlay on this particular document, also on the Homer Simpson resignation on this screenshot up here. That's telling me that I've actually marked these files for offline access. So it's, to do that, it's very easy. Let me go pull up a document that I haven't done that with yet. So let's go ahead and do this ZenWorks mobile management document that I uploaded a few minutes ago. And then right up here, if I tap on this circle with the down arrow, that marks it for download for offline access. And the X now just means that if I wanted to remove it from offline access, I could do that. So it's very easy to go ahead and get that sort of iFolder-like technology with a mobile device at this point and get that offline sync. and I'll show you in a couple of minutes how we access that. The other thing I wanted to point out, just a quick plug for one other thing, we've got that sort of open with or share with icon, and if I tap that, you can see iPrint in the list. So later on when we release our iPrint product, you'll be able to easily print these documents that you've got in Filer. So with that being said, let me head back in here, and I'm going to actually pull up a picture that I had uploaded earlier so we can see some of the comments. So here's a picture I took one day as I was chopping a habanero pepper up. So a very exciting picture. If I want to get a little bigger view, I can tap on this up here and actually see, the entire picture and kind of scroll and things like that. But also, if I tap down here, I can again view all those comments. And if I wanted to add another comment, it's as simple as just hitting the plus sign there. So we'll go ahead and bring the comments back down. And of course, I don't have to expand it to view comments. I can still get that same view right from here as well. All right, so we've got that great iOS look and feel. I can backtrack, or I could hit the home button right here and go back to that home screen if I want to. And again, all the shared with me information is out there, as you can see. Now, what I want to point out from the home screen here is we were talking about downloads earlier, and just to show that I can access some of this information when I'm offline, I'm going to go ahead and sign out. So I'm no longer signed in. You can see there's a note here I'm offline. But if I go down here and tap on downloads, you can see that information is out there. So if I go ahead and, actually that might have been a bad example. I was testing some of this stuff out earlier. All right. So this Homer Simpson one, tap on it, and again, you can see that information is readily available. Now, please keep in mind, as you see every now and then, like I tapped on one document, it's not displaying it. It's still early beta, so a couple of these things are some of the kinks that are being worked out still. But again, what I wanted to make sure you guys really get a good feel for is that even though I'm no longer signed in, I can still access my information. Of course, if I want to, I can sign back in. We also have, the what's new in here, just like what we had with the web client. So again, I can see everything that's out there, most recently added or commented on. And again, integrated search. So if I go in and search for Mr. Homer Simpson again, and you can see there it is right there in the results, and I can tap on it and view it. So all of this functionality that you saw on the web client, again, we want to have that with a mobile client. And what I will show here, and the connectivity with my USB cable has been a little funky. So let's see here if I, let's see. Give me just one moment. Oh, there we go, reconnected. Again, go to Filer. And this being an Android phone, not an Android tablet, it's got limited screen real estate. So you might get a few things there. And of course, I got this wonderful, really bad USB cable here, which is the one that I happen to have handy. But again, access to all that same information, just like what you saw there within iOS. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead now and talk about what we do on Windows. And actually, before I start, real quick, Amy, do you have any other questions come up in here?
We do actually have several questions. If you'd like, we can answer those now, or we can get to those at the end. It's up to you.
Why don't we just take a break for a minute from the demo before I get into Windows and Mac and go through with some of the questions here. Oh, can I view those questions, actually? I'm not sure how this works. I'll let you read through them, Amy, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, no, I can. Let's see. The first question I'm seeing, Holly asked Linux clients. I'm not sure if that makes.
Sure. I think she's asking, do we have a Linux client or any plans for one? So, Holly, I'm assuming that's your question. We don't have a Linux client right now. It's something that has come up more than once. Several customers have asked for it. It's not anything that we've got really planned for the near term. Really, our main focus is Windows and Mac. For those Linux users, though, they should be able to use the web client. And really what the Linux client is going to bring, as you'll see here momentarily, is that offline file sync, that sort of iFolder-like technology. But at the end of the day, by using the web client, they can still download documents. They could still upload documents. You just wouldn't have that sort of automatic sync. So it's something that we're investigating, based on demand. It's something that, we may add in the future, but we don't have anything with that right now.
Okay. The next question, if a user on an iPad makes a change or annotates to a file, can that user sync the changes back to another user from the iPad?
Yes, and so that is one of our goals here. When you access the document initially within the iPad, you know, you're just doing a kind of a view access, but then if you go ahead and use that open with or share with icon and open, let's say, a Word document in a particular Office Suite package that you've got installed on the iPad, you can then go ahead and make changes and have those changes sync back to the, you know, the back-end file system through Filr, so that ultimately you can make changes from a mobile device and other users will be able to see those changes you've made.
And are files on an iPad encrypted and secured?
My understanding, and I'll have to double check that one, but my understanding with the iPad is that as long as you've enabled a passcode on it, that the entire file system, if you want to call it that, is actually encrypted. The entire device is encrypted. So my understanding is that's basically just a native function within iOS, again, as long as a passcode's in there. But I'll double check if there's anything else in particular we are doing with that. I do not believe Filr itself will do anything, so anything additional about encryption would maybe come from something like ZenWorks mobile management.
Okay, perfect. The next question, will Windows XP be a supported client, not just web?
Yes, yeah, XP, Windows 7, and Windows 8.
Okay, and does it respect eDirectory groups?
Yeah, so we'll support both eDir and Active Directory. We'll be able to go ahead and do provisioning by groups as well as individual users. And, you know, access rights also on the back-end file system will be honored too. So if you've given certain users or groups permissions to files, we are going to honor that. And in fact, I did a recent test on my home environment here where I have an OES2 server, and I've got on one of the NSS volumes, I've got a folder called users and then all the home directories underneath that. And then I went ahead and deployed the Filr appliance. If I log in, say, to the web client as myself, and I've got full rights to the entire server, I can go to that net folder, that shared folder, and see all the home directories. If I log into the web client as a regular user, I only see my own home directory there, and I can't see any of the others because I don't have rights.
Okay, so the next question I'm seeing, will this be able to aggregate other cloud-based storage services like Dropbox or even web DAV services?
It's one of those things that we're investigating, you know, what are other file stores that we can go ahead and bring into this, because at the end of the day, Filr is just this abstraction layer to get to your information, and no one really cares as far as the user is concerned. You know, they don't care where their files are, they just want to get to them. So those are the things that we're looking at is for the back end, you know, maybe it's Byod, maybe it's Sharepoint, maybe it's some of the cloud storage providers. So, you know, some of that is to be determined as far as, you know, which specific pieces and when we'll be doing that. But, you know, for that initial version 1 release, it'll be OES and Windows only.
Okay, let's see. Will it delete the file off the end user machine when the link expires?
That's something that we're still playing with. I don't really have a great answer on that one because I know that is a common request and we want to make that happen. But I know that's one of the things that are still being worked on right now through this beta process.
Okay. Will this be able to be a replacement for Vibe?
You know, that's an interesting question, and it's not the first time I've heard that question. So Vibe and Filr each have their own, you know, unique areas where they do things. You know, Filr obviously does the file collaboration, and if that's the only thing you're using Vibe for, you know, potentially you could look at moving to Filr. However, Vibe does a lot more than just file sharing. So most of our customers that already are using Vibe, you know, they would more than likely continue to use that because they are doing some of the team collaboration and some of the additional things that Filr doesn't do. At the end of the day, you know, what we're looking at is being able to get the two to complement each other. So, for instance, if you've got Vibe out there already and using document management and all the other features, of using Filr as a way to be able to get access, as just another way, I should say, to get access to the documents in Vibe. But it's not really meant to replace Vibe because, again, ultimately Filr is very narrow focus when it comes to files, whereas Vibe is so much more than that.
Okay, so the next question, will there be a cost for the iOS or Android apps?
Not at this time. So it's the current plan that, and unless that changes, which again, all of this is of course subject to change before we ship. But the plan is, if you get a free entitlement to this, because you've got OES, that's going to be the appliance and everything else needed to make it work. So the Windows apps, the Mac apps, and then the mobile apps.
Okay, how well does this scale? If you have thousands of users and millions of files, do you need multiple Filer appliances?
Well, ultimately, you are going to need, more than one appliance if you're in a large environment. And so some of the documentation that will be out there and regarding scalability and how to deploy this, we'll actually make a note. Smaller environments, which are typically about 500 or so users or less, could get by with just a single appliance that has all roles. Once you get larger than that, you'd want to split up the roles. And what will actually be available, too, is from partners as well as from Novell Consulting to do custom engagements to go even more than just having appliances that do one of the three roles, but to have them split out in different parts of the network and things like that. So there will definitely be ways to scale this thing up and out. So a lot of that's just going to really depend on the size of your environment and what your needs are.
Okay, are you working on a Windows 8 RT client?
Not that I'm aware of at this moment, at least not for the shipping version 1 release. That's something that, obviously we'll need to look at, because not just Windows 8 RT for the Surface tablet, but then there's also Windows Phone 8. But initially, with version 1, what we're looking at is Android and iOS. And actually, with that question, because we might have a few more coming in, Amy, I'm going to go ahead and kind of pick back up on some more of the demo here, finish off the Windows and Mac pieces, and then I think we'll take the rest of the time to hit some more questions, if that sounds okay.
That sounds great.
All right, cool. All right, so I want to go ahead and pick up here with showing you Windows 7, and again, similar type of thing with XP and 8. And actually, what you may be able to see is a notice right here at the bottom of the screen. Well, it was there, it finally went away, but actually I had a notification that that file I had uploaded into Filr, the ZenWorks Mobile Management PDF, that it went ahead and synced down to my device here, and then again, that notification let me know that a new file was added. So if I go ahead and take a look here, you can see, first of all, Novell Filer being added both to your libraries and to your favorites. It will be a library both on Windows 7 and Windows 8, since only those two OSs have a library. And when I go into Novell Filer, I've got access to my files and shared with me. Those are what are added by default. You can add net folders if you like. You just obviously have to be cautious because there could be a lot of information out there. But again, in this environment, we don't have any net folders defined, so I don't have any of those syncing down as a result. Again, if I go into my files, I can, again, access all that same information that was out there, so you can see a representation of everything that we saw through the web client. What we'll also be doing is, if you right-click on a document, like for instance, I got a couple of screenshots here, right from Windows 7, I can actually say Share. Now, this is going to come up and ask for a username, so let me go ahead and authenticate. And that's one of those things that I need to double-check that we're going to actually remove that extra authentication piece. So I believe that might just be something in this current build. But again, once it comes up, there's the sharing. So I don't have to go out to the web client right from my Windows 7 machine. I could go ahead and choose to share this with another user. So I can share this, for instance, with Lothar, my boss, because he would really like to see this screenshot. I know you wanted to see this screenshot. And once I say OK, now he's going to get an email notification. And again, then I'm left with a screen that looked similar earlier when we pulled up the details of a particular file. And then if I wanted to get right to this, you see this is where it went to after I shared it. But if I just want to go right to that screen where I can just view information about it, again, I could say view in a web browser. It's going to come up. And again, issue we're working on with the authentication piece. Once I authenticate, again, I'm going to go right back to that screen we saw a minute ago. Just the sharing box won't be there. So again, I can essentially, without having to manually pull up a browser and log in and find the file or whatever, right from within Windows 7, I can go ahead, or Windows, I should say, I can go in and say view in a web browser and take a look at the information regarding that file. And again, the shared with me was also there, so again, just to point out there, I can pull up this particular image, you know, and there we go. It's a picture of the Biltmore Library, whatever that is. That's out there. So, you know, if I need to view comments and stuff like that, all I got to do is say view in a web browser, and I've got access to all the information. I can also choose to subscribe to a document, so this is useful, especially with shared with me, as changes are made to the document and whether there be comments or the file itself was edited, I can set it up so that I actually get email notifications to let me know that changes were made to the file. And then lastly, I could choose to synchronize a file now rather than to wait for the actual schedule of it if need be. And that being said, let me flip over to the Mac. So you can see a Mac here running OS 10.7 something. So this guy's running Lion, and I've installed the Filer client. So again, we've got Filer up here. Open the Filer folder. Same thing like what we were seeing over there on Windows. Again, that very common experience across all of them, and I can go to My Files and take a look at, you know, some of that information. So if I go down here and then my test folder, I can take a look at that habanero pepper that I cut up earlier, as exciting as that is. So we can see that, and then, you know, we can, from the Filer screen here again, I could go ahead and say view it on the web, and then that'll pull up a browser just going to the Filer website, or I can also say shared by me. Again, that'll open up a browser and go straight to the shared by me section of the Filer website. So again, a lot of this stuff is meant to be, you know, very, very similar across the different platforms. So that being said, I know I saw some questions that were just popping up right here. So Amy, I'll go ahead and I guess at this point, let's go ahead and start going over the rest of the questions here, and we'll answer them to the best of my abilities.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. The first question I'm seeing, can you edit or add and delete from mobile devices?
That is something that's definitely planned to be there. Right now, some of that is being debated, how much of that will be in version 1. One thing that is there, though, and actually I can show this from iOS. Let me turn this back on. Give me just a moment here. All right, so if I go under, let's see, where was that? Well, you know, that might have been pulled off right now. You know what? So I apologize for that. There was a button I know that we were looking at that actually would be in the upper portion of the screen to actually upload a file from the camera roll, if you will. But I don't see that showing up right here at the moment, so I'll have to double check on that. But that is one of those things that, again, we've been discussing because that definitely needs to be there, and we acknowledge that. It's just whether or not the ability to actually add and upload will be there from the mobile clients in version 1. So that's something that we'll probably have more information on, I would say, around the brain share time frame once we go public beta.
Okay, the next question I'm seeing, we would want to be able to share with consultants and owners how is authentication for external parties done? Sure.
So there's a couple of options when you do external sharing. One is you can do just a completely public share, so essentially all that's doing is emailing a link to someone and nothing more. But we can also do what we call public trust. There we support OpenID authentication, so like for instance, you know, Gmail supports OpenID. So if I go ahead and let's say share something with jmartin@gmail.com, when I receive that notification and click on the link, I'll actually authenticate using my Gmail credentials because of OpenID authentication and get access to the file. And at that point, I can actually collaborate on the file, do an edit in place with the WebDAV stuff because I'll be authenticated. So if you've got, you know, more sensitive information you don't want to just send out to the public, but rather you want to actually collaborate with someone external to the organization, we definitely do have that capability.
Okay, and how do you back up this product? Is it going to require special integration with the back vendor?
Well, you know, the thing that's in here is really, as far as backing up, is going to be the configuration of the appliance, and really a lot of that is just what's stored in the MySQL database, because that is the database that's at the heart of the appliance. Otherwise, the files themselves, keep in mind, those are never stored on the Filer appliance. So all these files that we're accessing are stored on your back end, either OES or Windows servers. So you just continue to back those up to get that content. We do have the index that we build of all the content. You could choose to back that up. Otherwise, in the event of a failure, you could always rebuild the index. So really the only thing that you have to worry about is the MySQL database. As long as you have a solution to back up MySQL, you can back up this database and make sure you've got your actual Filer appliance configuration information intact.
Okay, is this SOX compliant?
I'll have to look into that. I honestly do not know. I'll make a note of that.
Okay. The next question, does the Windows client use a lot of system resources like iFolder does?
Right now, if you have a ton of files, it does. Like, for instance, in my home environment where I'm syncing my OES2 home directory, I've got over 3,000 files. That at the moment is causing a little bit of CPU utilization, but that's being investigated. So ultimately, the goal is to have this have a minimal impact on the Windows box.
Okay, and it looks like a follow-up to a previous question. How does this work with existing OES and SS file systems?
Sure. So, I mean, that's really the whole point of this, is to drop it into those existing networks. So what you do is you already have the OES servers, you've got NSS volumes on them, you've got all your information on them. You'll drop the Filer appliance into your environment, again, using VMware. And once you go ahead and bring this thing up, you go ahead and tell it to read eDirectory in that case to provision the users. As it does that, you can actually say grant them access to the home directory, and it's just automatic. It'll read basically that home directory attribute out of eder for all the user objects. And then the net folders are those shared spaces. So one thing that for anyone that might be familiar with net storage, one thing that's different is net storage will automatically create those map drives for you based on your login script. We don't do that sort of parsing here. So as administrator, when you initially set this up, you will need to define your different network shares, but you're just pointing to the existing OES2 volumes that you have out there. And once you've defined them and who gets access to them, then at that point, everybody's able to access Filer to get access to their information rather than having to go directly, via, say, a map drive with the Novell client.
All right. It looks like another follow-up, just a clarification. SOX is Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yeah, I know it's Sarbanes-Oxley, but I'm not sure what we have in here as far as SOX compliance goes. I know there's some auditing, but I just need to double check if this is SOX compliant or not.
Okay, perfect. So the next question, let's see. If a file is downloaded to a mobile device, will it be erased if the device has been stolen?
Well, that's an interesting question. And so one of the things that we're actually looking at here is integrating Filer with ZenWorks Mobile Management. And so I don't know how many people on the conference are familiar with our MDM solution, but one of the things that we're looking at here is that, ZenWorks already has the ability to do, let's say, a selective wipe or a full wipe. And obviously, if you do a full wipe, you're done. You clean the device, including all files that were downloaded, nothing to worry about. So really, in the event it's stolen, you need a way to completely wipe the device. But in the case of, let's say, someone leaves the organization and you want to do that selective wipe, well, because of that share with functionality that's in iOS, I could take a file, then, open it into another application. And so what we're looking at with ZMM is having the ability to actually track all those files that were synced with Filer, so that way if you want to do a selective wipe and pull the Filer app off along with their other, let's say, corporate email and stuff, that we could actually pull off all of the files that were synced via Filer, so that way all that information is gone as well just by issuing a single selective wipe command out of ZMM. Otherwise, you're looking at, if you deprovision a user from Filr, it's the same thing like with on Windows, does their information go away? And that's one of the things that we're still working on from that aspect. So really and truly, it's almost more of an MDM question, though. That one, if the device is stolen, what do you do? And so if you go with our MDM solution, at least, have some additional capability you can have beyond just, say, a full wipe that other vendors might provide.
Okay, perfect. Looks like the next question is, will other iOS apps be able to leverage Filr? For example, if you open documents in Docs2Go, will we be able to upload the file back to Filr, similar to Dropbox?
Sure. So that's one of the things that we're looking at here is basically, if I go into like the, a gallery or whatever application and access files, of being able to say share with Filr. So that's really the whole thing that we're looking for on this, is that Filr brings the file down, and from within Filr you can open it in another document or another application, make your changes in that other application, and then basically share it with Filr to upload that thing back again.
Okay, the next question, she just said same question regarding Sharepoint Replacement integration.
Yeah, so that's one of those things that we're looking at. Definitely won't be there for version 1, but when we talk about this being an abstraction layer to get access to your files no matter where they are, that is definitely one of the ones that we're considering, is being able to access files that are stored within SharePoint.
Okay, how do you share with external users?
It's as simple as just typing in their email address. So just like I did a share before, and it would start to automatically fill in all the local users that were provisioned from the LDAP source, I could instead type in an email address and again choose to make them viewer only or make them an editor of the file. So actually, if I go back in here, I'm going to do that from the web client. Just quickly show. At one point we had that ability, and then that was actually turned off because the administrator can do that. And it was turned off here simply because in one of the very early builds there was an issue with it. But again, to actually share it, that's all I would need to do. Now here external sharing is turned off. If it was turned on, as soon as I hit enter, that would actually show up here. And for type, instead of saying user, it would say external.
Okay, perfect. So the next question, will there be a recording of this session? Yes, there is. I'll provide that to you. You'll probably get an email in about a day with the recordings from the webinars. We also had a question previously about getting slides from Joe. So Joe, if you don't mind,
the slides, Amy.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
No
yeah, just send them on to me, and then I'll include them with the recording of the webinar.
Sure.
Okay, so the next question, besides comments, does it track edits or supporting any, does it track edits or support any versioning?
So as far as tracking edits go, so there's a couple of things to that. So one of the things I brought up earlier was that sort of like audit report, usage report. So that's going to show me who has viewed it, who has edited, things like that. Now the other thing too is, let's say you've got two people that are actually, you know what, I'm going down the line of, I was thinking of something else. So beyond that, versioning would be the next key thing. That one, that feature is slated for a future version of Filr. That's not there in this initial release, because what we're really looking at is for Filr to be a replacement of iFolder, NetStorage, QuickFinder, and that old archive and versioning product that was there in NetWare and OES. So versioning is intended to be there, but won't make the initial release.
Okay, and how does it work with IE?
I just like to use Firefox, but I mean, it will work with Internet Explorer. I mean, Internet Explorer is definitely a supported browser along with Chrome and Safari. I mean, I can... just so that everyone can see I'm not making up that it works with IE. I mean, there it is. That is definitely one of our officially supported browsers.
Okay, perfect. Can multiple users modify the file at the same time, or do they have to download it?
Well, if two people try to do it literally at the same time, let me think about this one here, because we do, since we honor, the file system with rights and things like that, we also look at locks out there. So especially if you're trying to do a web dev edit in place. But at the end of the day, like if I go in and, I've synced a file, another user has synced a file, if I go in, open it, I'm actually working off the local copy, not the one on the server. I make a change, it'll sync back up. But in the meantime, I could see where there's a collision on the other side. I'll need to double check what happens, who's going to win in that case, where basically two people edited the local copy and they're both trying to sync back up. As I am not entirely sure, so I will add that to my list. Amy,
Okay,
when this is all done, can I email you, by the way, like answers to some of these questions that I had to do some follow-up on?
Yes, absolutely. That would be fine. I will also provide you with all the questions that have been asked that we were able to answer and any that we don't get to.
Okay,
you could follow up with them directly also.
Great.
Okay, so it looks like we have about 5 more minutes left for questions. Let's see the next one. Is it possible to restrict the ability for users to share files or folders at all? For example, restrict them to only the net folders option.
Sure. So you can set up the restrictions there as far as whether or not sharing is allowed at all. And we actually have a very rich access control method that can be used with Filr. So you can definitely get very granular if you need to allow sharing from one area but not from another. It's like, for instance, when I initially set up the appliance in my home environment, sharing was not enabled at all anywhere. And then even when I turned it on, I actually had to go in and do some additional access controls to get sharing to work for everybody. So, we definitely know that that's an important aspect here, and we do offer, quite a few controls around sharing.
Okay, can Filr read login scripts, or do we need to create all net folder connections manually?
You'll need to create them manually one time. It does not parse the login scripts like, say, net storage does. But, it is just a one-time creation, and once you've done that, then, obviously that net storage information remains out there, and all you have to do is potentially change, who has access to those net folders. Though since you can do it by group, ideally you would just change, some of the LDAP group membership.
Okay, for files that are not in the net folders, were those files actually stored?
So really, if it's not in a net folder, so it's not in that shared space, then you've got either their home directories, obviously, or you have this sort of ad hoc space. So if I, like want to go in and have my personal files, like I mentioned before, that's not in my home directory, and I'm accessing them through Filr, ultimately that's some back-end ad hoc storage space that you would find either on an OES server or on a Windows server. So it's just space that's out there that basically is kind of sort of user self-service, if you will, for accessing all of that.
Okay, what kinds of files are being indexed?
We can index anything that those Oracle viewers support. So I'll find the link and I can include it as part of the follow-ups, but it's a large number of file types.
Okay, can you see how you or another has access, either by group or direct?
Well, there are a couple of things I can do. Like if we look at a file that actually, let's not even go individual files. If I just say shared by me, then right away I can see who has access to these files. So like this Joe's test folder, the Homer Simpson resignation, that picture of the habanero pepper. These are all the users that have access. And of course, if I'd given access to groups, then that would show up here as well. So I'm not sure if that necessarily answers the question or not, but that would be my initial inclination there.
Okay. Can the offline function be turned off on the server?
Yes.
Okay, so then the next question, there's actually two that kind of go together here, and you may have already addressed part of this. Can you upload files onto mobile devices? And then also, can you edit or create documents from mobile devices?
Sure. So edit from them, that is planned for version 1. I'm going to have to double check on adding because I know there was some discussion and it's definitely a feature that we want to be in there. The question is whether or not in version 1 you'll be able to do that. I believe the answer is yes, but that's something that I need to follow up on.
Okay. What level of auditing is there from a system admin perspective?
You know, there is some auditing that we have. We know that we need to improve upon some of the logging and auditing capabilities. You know, and anything that we do audit is ultimately stored within or is referencing that I can't talk today, the MySQL database. So you have a couple of options of leveraging that database directly and going with some of the auditing we have here. So some of that we'll definitely dive into a little bit further, you know, once we get closer to the release version of the product and we got a better answer as far as the auditing capabilities goes.
Okay. Does the web client work well behind Novell's Access Manager?
Yes, and in fact, you know, I can't show you because I'm not an administrator on this particular instance, but as an administrator, you go in and actually configure specific NAM settings if this is going to sit behind Access Manager. So yeah, NAM is definitely supported and understood as something that many of our customers will leverage.
All right. Are there deployable options other than appliances, for example, installable packages on OES or SLES?
Not at this time. The only thing that we've got right now is the appliance for VMware. Some consideration towards expanding that to supporting other hypervisors, but still keeping it as an appliance install. But not really any plans right now to make it as a standalone software installer.
Okay, looks like we only have time for about one more question, and then if your question was not answered, then we'll have to follow up with you after the webinar. So our last question for today, can you customize what files or folders are synced from a net folder?
Well, yeah, you can customize some of that, right? Because when you do the client, you can choose whether or not to even do a net folder. And so if I double click here real quick, as I know we're running short on time, and I go to synchronize folders, so I can go ahead and choose, you know, an additional folder to go ahead and synchronize out here. So I could do an entire net folder, or I believe, but I need to double check that I could do a subfolder, but again, I don't have any net folders out here to define. But you can see under my files, at least if I wanted to, I could add this. It won't allow me to add it now because I'm already syncing the entire my files. But I believe the answer is yes, but again, I will double check.